Hey everyone, welcome back to my little Salem travel vlog. We got into Salem last night and we are staying at a place called Marblehead, which is like maybe 10 minutes southeast of Salem. It's like a cute little seaside town actually. So we got to our Airbnb. This is kind of like a tiny little room. We have an extra room and it comes with like a little fridge and a bathroom. So we have everything that we need. We are spending 2 days in Salem and 1 day in Boston. We is me and my husband. We left our kiddo at home who promptly got us sick before we left. You can tell from my voice we're both sick. So we mostly spent last night recuperating. But today and tomorrow we are going to spend in Salem. We're going to be checking out a bunch of cool like areas, a bunch of bucket list items I've always wanted to see. And I'm hoping that I can just share it with you so that if you're ever in the area, if you ever want to see Salem, especially as a witchy woo-woo person, you can check out some of these places as well. There's a ton of cool stores, museums. There's also a lot that seemed a little out there, a little, what's the word I want to use? They seemed really like kitschy. So we're gonna test them out, see what is great, see what we would recommend. We are here kind of towards the end of September. It's September 20th today, so we're actually gonna be here over Mabon, which is kind of cool. It's a little too early for the fall colors for sure, but we wanted to come before October because apparently October here is just nuts with all of Salem. So Salem, if you didn't know, is the home of where a lot of the witch trials happened back in the day. We're going to learn a lot about that over the next 2 days. And although the witches were burned back then, I think there has been a community that has been built here around that. There's a lot of witches, a lot of woo-woo people that kind of come to this area because they are kind of reclaiming that energy, reclaiming their own authenticity in what they do. And so it's just a really cool area to visit now because there's just a conglomeration of a lot of like psychics, witches, all that good stuff. So I felt like it was absolutely necessary for me to vlog this. I came just kind of on a little baby moon. We are 4 months out from having our second kiddo right now. And we also wanted just a little mini vacation, but I also really wanted to vlog this because I know that you guys would be totally interested in this place. So I'm so excited. I'm ready to get in the car, go grab a coffee, and start exploring. So let's go. So we started at the Salem Witch Museum, which was a really cool area. And unfortunately, I could not film at all in there. So the photos that I've got are mostly from the internet. However, this place gave like a really quick, like 20-minute theater in the round style explanation of what happened during the Salem Witch Trials. So it was kind of kitschy because it's just a bunch of figurines standing around. They've got a voiceover that was literally recorded in the 70s explaining the events. And I later find out that a lot of it is kind of brushed over, sensationalized, kind of accurate, kind of not. The Salem Witch Trials really started with one family who had some girls who were doing some weird things. It was a long winter, but basically everyone speculated that they were witches. We don't really know if they were or not, but basically to save themselves, they called out other people as witches. And there was a lot of speculation and no one actually had any firm proof. The whole situation is just described as hysteria. There was a lot of speculation. Everyone in the system got blamed for something that did not happen. And a lot of people were put on trial and killed with absolutely no evidence, absolutely no fair trials. And a lot of people died. So after the play that you kind of watch, you go to kind of like a normal museum where you walk around and look at a bunch of information and facts. And the most surprising thing I learned was that only about 20-25 people actually died in America during the Salem Witch Trials. None of them actually burned. The majority of the witch trials actually happened in Europe. There were thousands of people that died over there. So that was one huge misconception I had that I learned. About the only thing I got of this place was the gift shop. It was actually a really cute gift shop, one of the better ones there. So I grabbed a cute little book for my son from there. We were also dealing with a lot of like mini crises, calling home. My dog got really sick at the boarding facility. My son was also sick. You don't see that much in this vlog, but we had to deal with that quite a bit. This is us at the Commons Park. It's a good little area to just kind of take a break. It's also a good like spot to start from and park at if you want to see a bunch of the sights. So next we just walked around and visited a ton of stores. This is where I started to realize that there are two sides of Salem. There's definitely a more sensationalistic, touristy side of Salem, and then a more like, I would say, historical or accurate side. And they would also have like psychics that were hugely advertised, their faces blown up, like there would be pamphlets everywhere about this psychic. And then the prices would be just astronomical. Honestly, I didn't show too many of these stores because a lot of them actually didn't allow you to record, so I didn't even film the worst of the worst. Most of what's in this vlog is probably the better stores that we walked into. One of the stores we almost skipped over was this Ouija board museum. It's at a gift shop in the front, but towards the back there is a whole museum of like all the oldest Ouija boards out there, and we were hesitant, but we paid the extra money to go in, and it was so worth it. Mostly because the guy that created the entire exhibit was there, and he came out and he was just so excited to talk about Ouija boards, and he was walking around and telling us about everything that was in there, and you could definitely feel some energy in here as well. And we learned a lot of really cool facts. They had a lot of cool things on display, and ultimately this guy just made it like so much fun. So I would highly recommend doing the Ouija board museum. He had tracked down a lot of cool stuff and had people send boards into him. Ultimately, I was really glad that all of my facts were correct about my research on the Ouija board, but he was even finding out newer things about the Ouija board that even I hadn't heard of. So it was really cool to listen to, and they had some really cool boards, like this braille board and this really cute pink one. I really want this one. They also have some for sale if you want them, but they're like a couple $100, just FYI. So most everything is kind of along this Essex Street and maybe a block or two off of that. It's really easy, really walkable, but this is kind of like the main street that you see. It gets really crowded, but know that this is kind of like the main area, and everything is in walking distance from here. I'm, 5 months pregnant, and I was able to walk around pretty much all day just fine. We stopped for lunch at the Direwolf Tavern. I'd recommend this place. It had really good food, and it had a really cool bar. And then we walked over to the Bewitched statue. I did not know, but Salem was like not a destination at all until they filmed a couple episodes here back in the 50s, 60s. So this is just kind of commemorating that moment, and it really put this city on the map as like a tourist destination, which is a positive and a negative. The witch house I would describe as like quintessential Salem, definitely like a huge picture spot, but the inside is very historically accurate for the time, and it has a lot of really great information inside. Some of this stuff is really interesting if you pause to read it, especially the witch cake. Gross. And one of the things that I've taught on my channel was apparently demonized back in this time, that whole egg divination ritual. Pretty cool. But this really gave you like a feel for the time. I just like the more historical side of stuff. It was cool to see like how people lived back then. Lots of places in the area though do close at 5, including this place. We actually came back the following day to this because we had missed it on our first day. And I believe this is one of those places that you can only get in day of. I don't think you can get advance tickets for this place. Definitely double check. Right next to this is the Ropes Mansion, which you might recognize as Allison's house from Hocus Pocus. You can actually go inside. I think you gotta buy tickets ahead of time, but around the back you can walk into the garden at any time of day. It's completely open to the public. Now this store was cool shit. They had this huge witch statue. It was actually built in an old bank, but it is called Blackcraft. They had a lot of like really nice stuff, really nice clothing. I actually bought a tarot deck from this place. Actually an oracle deck just on a whim. Freaking loved it. And I do believe they have an online store as well. This place was a really cute shop and like ice cream store combo. Honestly, the ice cream wasn't very good, but it was nice because we grabbed some and we were waiting kind of near the town hall area for our tour to start with Bewitched Tours. We were doing a nighttime tour.
Different segments of society.
This was probably my favorite part of the entire trip. It was 2 hours. It was a nighttime tour. We went with Bewitched Tours, the company. There are so many companies offering tours, it's ridiculous. But this one was a historic tour. They also have ghost tours, which really they're just trying to walk around and kind of scare you and be like, ooh. And I'm not a fan of that. Like, I would rather have the facts and the information. Again, if that's not up your alley, definitely try a ghost tour. This gave me the full understanding of Salem. Like, I was able to see it with much more respect. I was able to see also that, like, the people of Salem had differing opinions on like what really happened. We were walking by tour groups and our tour guide would correct, you know, things that we were overhearing. He's like, no, that didn't really happen. You really saw what happened to these people back in the day, and you really saw that it was the byproduct of greedy men, a bad judicial system, and some extreme religious groups, and the consequences of that. And I think it just made me see Salem in the light that it should be seen in. And that's why I would highly recommend doing a historical tour with Bewitched. On to day 2 of our trip. This is us leaving our Airbnb. I think one of my favorite parts of this trip was just looking at the architecture of the East Coast. We just don't have these cool old houses that you guys do over here, and I love it. One thing I don't like about the East Coast, though, is the drivers. You guys are insane. I wanted to talk a little bit about parking and the pricing. Parking in downtown Salem is extremely hard to get. They have lots, but they're actually super reasonable. I don't know if they hike up the prices in October. I would not be surprised. But the prices we paid were just maybe like $9 for like the whole day. However, getting in and out of downtown, there's like no street parking. It's really tight, small streets. So again, I would recommend Ubering if you can. Also, bathrooms were a little bit hard to come by. A lot of places did not have public restrooms. There are some in the main like mall area, and you can obviously find some in restaurants. But we had a little bit harder of a time finding places, so just give yourself extra time when you know you gotta go. Again, know that October is going to be so much worse than this. You are seeing this in September. You might not even be able to get a parking spot or find anything remotely close to downtown. We started by going to the Salem Witch Trials Memorial. This is actually super new. The graveyard next to it has been there for a long time, but they very recently put up plaques and stones for those who actually were killed during this time. On a side note, I think that the movie and book, The Crucible, is a good representation of kind of what happened energetically, emotionally, although it might not be exactly historically accurate. So I'd also recommend watching that movie before you go. I think the main person to note that is in this cemetery is the judge, Judge Hawthorne, who technically wasn't even really a judge, but he was the one to kind of judge these trials. He was like the bad guy, and he is like one of the major headstones in this cemetery. You might see some of these weird museums that are like the witch dungeon museum and a pirate museum, honestly, and the wax museum. Don't do it. They were just very much so that touristy trap that you could fall into. Now, this store, Pentagram, actually felt like a really good store, especially with the readers. They were all busy when I walked in, but this was the only place that I actually felt like I would stop and get a reading from somebody. And this Pickman house is right next to that cemetery. It's actually free to walk into, so if you don't end up doing that Salem Witch house, this might be a good alternative. Nothing like significant happened here. It's just a really good restoration of what the houses look like again at that time. And then we had gotten tickets to the Peabody Essex Museum. This had a very, very new exhibit for the Salem Witch Trials. I do not know if it will be there forever, but I want to say it was like $30-something to get in, but there were a lot of other like permanent exhibits that you could visit. Honestly, y'all, I was super disappointed by the Salem exhibit. It was just not, it was a small room, lots of like text, which, you know, you don't mind reading, but I also like when the exhibits are like interactive and they have like lots of things in them. It felt very like small and sad, and I just kept hearing so much about this, like from our tour guide and from like online about like, oh, they're releasing all these documents that haven't been released in forever, and I was just very underwhelmed, and I felt like they could have done so much better than this, and it took us maybe like 10 minutes to walk through, and I would save your money. If you do decide to go, though, some of their other exhibits had paintings from the Salem Witch Trials, and they had like other things from the area. I don't know why they didn't like just move it into this exhibit. However, if you're flying into Boston, I would actually check out the main art museum in Boston. We did that the following day, and it was so big, so massive, we could spend like days there. I don't have any footage of that, but it might be worth checking out if you are going to be staying in Boston for a little bit of time. Now we are back on this main street here, this Essex Street. If you go one block to the south, there is a street called Front Street. Honestly, I felt like that had some of the best shops. They were newer, they were less touristy, they were independent, and they had some really, really cute stuff. And of course, all the best like stores that I went into, I did not film. So I'm gonna list a couple here. There were just some shops that I was just so into that I forgot to film. Now, there was also this like wharf area a little bit further south, and it had a pocket of really good shops. One of them called Enchanted, I also didn't film. I actually really, really liked that store. And then this place, The Witchery, you can go in and get a broom kit. They also have classes for broom making and book binding, leather book binding. So they were completely sold out on classes when we went. So you will have to book this so far in advance. They were booked all the way through October when I showed up in mid-September. But I brought a broom making kit that I could take home and do myself. It came with an instruction video. So this was probably my favorite souvenir, and I now have it up in my house. I made a separate little short video of like my souvenir haul. If you want to check it out, I'll put that in the description down below. On the evening of our last night, we drove about like 20-30 minutes north of Salem to Danvers to the location of the Paris house. This is the location of where these girls first started having these fits and spells, and they were the ones who were first accused of witchcraft. And Samuel Paris, the one who owned the house, was also the minister during these trials. His slave Tituba also lived here and was a big part of these trials. And it's kind of hard to find because it's literally just a path in between some folks' houses. So I was really like worried we were walking into private property, but if you just follow this trail back, you will find the two homes. It's just the foundations that they had discovered later, but you could definitely feel stuff here.
This is where it all started, was that single home and those girls.
We went back downtown Salem to eat dinner. We had dinner at Turner's Seafood. Oh my gosh, it was amazing. The food was delicious. Highly, highly recommend. It's expensive, but worth it. So we are back to our Airbnb. We've done 2 full days in Salem, and I was answering some Instagram questions that I had, and somebody asked if the energy was intense here, and I was kind of saying, you know, like the crowds are intense, you know, just because there's a lot of people here and it's only September. It's intense because there's a lot of people walking around and doing the same things you're doing. The only time I really felt anything was there was like at least like 3 times where I was walking on the street and I thought someone was like behind my husband and I was like, oh, well, I should scooch over to the side, let them pass. And so I turn around to figure out where they are, and there's nobody there. And that's happened several times. So I was in here filming that, and then I walked over to my husband, and he's telling me all the things that he's experienced. And apparently he had the same thing happen as well.
The times that I experienced it, I was like standing still. But once was in the Ouija board museum, and I was looking at some of the boards that he had in a case, and I felt like there was somebody like looking at it over my shoulder, and I checked several times, and there wasn't somebody there. But it was that feeling of feeling like people were too close. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
The other time that I remember was Reverend Paris's like excavated like house remains or whatever, and I was reading the sign that was talking about all of it, and I heard something like the gravel like right behind me, and I assumed that it was Lauren because it was just a couple feet from me, and I like turned and looked, and she wasn't there at all. She was like a long ways away.
And then him saying that made me realize that I also had that same thing happen at the Paris's house. And so I heard something as well, like something walking, and so I thought, oh, okay, there's other people that are showing up. And I looked kind of towards the entrance and nobody was there. And like, I don't know, I feel like that happens so much that I just kind of like, oh, okay, it's spirit, whatever. And then I just like move on. And I think we were having a conversation of how like I'm so used to it. I don't know about Ian, but I experience it so much and it's like, oh, okay, that's spirit, whatever. And I just kind of move on. And I think that for me, I'm used to it and I don't want to sensationalize it, but I also know that that's what people are really interested in. And so I wanted to speak to it a little bit in this vlog. So yeah, that was our little vlog. I hope that I got enough footage. One, I might have to piece it together with some photos and stuff, but I really enjoyed coming here. I was glad that it wasn't like a total like letdown. That doesn't sound right, but like I was kind of worried that maybe, you know, it was just going to be way too touristy. But again, it was this mix of like, there was definitely some like really touristy, junky stores and places and psychics and experiences that you could have like fallen prey to. But then there was also some like really good historical stuff. There were some really good experiences, good stores, good people. I think you just have to kind of know like where to look for those. And personally, I liked all the history behind it. That's the Virgo in me. That's also the Virgo in my husband. So whenever we travel, we like learning, we like seeing museums and stuff like that. So if that's not up your alley, maybe skip those things. Otherwise, I would just try to look at some of the places we mentioned here, and really venture out on your own as well. I'm really glad we came in September as well, because I feel like if we were here in October, it would have just been way too crammed. Like those stores were already kind of small, and we might have missed out on a lot of those museums because a lot of them you didn't realize like you could only pay for like that day or that morning or the night before or several weeks in advance. So you kind of have to know before you go and plan ahead. So I had like notes of like, check this museum today, and some museums I just like couldn't even get into because it had weird hours. So if I had to pick my favorite thing that we did, although it was kind of not accurate, I liked the combo of doing the witch museum and the tour. I really liked the tour because I feel like I got a history and the knowledge that I wanted to get. Again, we did a historical tour, not a ghost tour. Probably the worst thing in some ways was that witch museum as well. But I think the worst thing honestly were the tourist trap places, like whether they be stores or psychics. There was a lot of like junk places that, you know, were clearly there just to like make money, and all they had were like shirts and trinkets, and just that main like strip, anywhere on that main strip kind of felt like cheap and touristy, and I feel like the psychics there were just kind of like cranking through people, and it just felt not very credible. But I think that was my least favorite part, is probably the people and the companies that kind of preyed on the tourists, unfortunately. Ultimately, I'd say spend a day and a half here. I don't think there's much else to do outside of that. So yeah, it really depends on how you want to do it. I hope that this vlog helped. I hope that it gives you some good ideas. Save it for the future so that you can check out some of these places. I really tried to hit like everything I could think of. And yeah, support those independent businesses and have some fun visiting the city while also paying respect to the history that was made here. If you like this video, give it a big thumbs up, and I will see you all in my next one. Alrighty, bye!